Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You've already read the thumbnail, but there's probably some scratching of heads as to what I mean by the Pagan Pulpit. I've been searching for something to do on Sunday because if I'm going to do this every day, one of the things that I need is like a repeatable framework to work from, where I do something on Sunday, something on Monday, something on Tuesday, and I'm still working on that. But the Pagan Pulpit is actually in my old, in fact, my current blog, The Gray Wayfarer. It's stuff that I used to do back in 2018-19. It was basically me being a pagan and putting together basically the old kind of liturgy service that I used to do when I was a theist and a Christian. But then I applied it to paganism and basically used the same format, except I use secular songs or pagan quotes as my text. And so it became more of a demonstrating a point. The point being that you can take any idea, turn it into a church service, and it will basically fly because you've organized it and you put some songs to go with this whole idea of a liturgy service. And so the Pagan Pulpit was basically me taking pagan quotes or atheist quotes even, and expounding on them with song, poems, and of course a short message. It was all written, except for the songs, which were basically YouTube videos that I provided the link for. There's a lot of anger in a lot of that. And so I'm looking at Sunday and I'm thinking to myself, atheist church, atheist assembly, just doesn't have that punch for me as a former preacher. And the Pagan Pulpit always works. Now, there's a lot of controversy about the use of pagan in relationship to atheists, because pagans technically are not atheists in some senses. Many pagans are just followers of the old ways. They follow Asatru, they follow Wicca. There's a lot of different pagan mythos. But the idea of a pagan being an atheist is actually something that was thrown at us, where basically a bunch of Christians and theists accused atheists of just basically being pagans. And maybe it was wrong for them to do it at the time, but we kind of owned that. We owned it too. So pagan is actually, from a theist standpoint, is a broad term of any viewpoint that seems odd and not aligning with the mainstream of Christianity or Islam or Judaism, something of that nature. So pagan is either somebody who follows the pagan ways, an agnostic, an atheist, something of that nature in the broader context. So my idea basically is to kind of do with this channel on Sunday what I did with that blog, which is kind of look at it from the standpoint of, can you take atheist thoughts and atheist ideas based on the conclusion that there is no God? What implications does that have? Does it have any implications that are philosophical? I think the answer is yes, but we're going to have to take them one at a time. Today, I really looked around trying to find somebody that would resonate with everybody, and I couldn't really find anything. So I'm going to use one of my own expressions that I made up. At least I haven't been able to find somebody else that quotes this, so maybe somebody else has done it, but I just haven't found it. So I'm not going to claim to complete originality here or authenticity, but it's an expression I made up as I was considering human nature and looking at a lot of Norse mythology, because as we all know, Odin has a couple of wolves. He also has a couple of ravens. He also has a horse. But it's the ravens and the wolves that I find most intriguing. In fact, if you come to my apartment, you will see a lot of wolf and raven symboly, particularly Viking symbols. Hell, I've even got a picture of Odin on my wall in my kitchen because I like the imagery of it. Now, what fascinates me about this, I began to think about it, is I began to look at the relationship between wolves and ravens. And it's actually kind of symbiotic. The ravens, of course, from their vantage points as flyers, can see things the wolves cannot. The wolves, on the other hand, have the power as a pack to take down larger prey. And so you will often see ravens and wolves actually together. They seem to enjoy each other's company. So when the people creating the mythology did this with Odin, they weren't just randomly picking ravens and wolves, because they were actually observing ravens and wolves in the wild and looking at how they worked together and how they were part of something together. And so they would come together and work together. Now the ravens, because of their flying vantage point, could warn the wolves of danger, or kind of even look and say, hey, there's something over here, why don't you go check it out, in their own primitive ways of communicating. This is why, from an atheist standpoint, I don't think we should open up our viewpoint of what language is a little bit, because I think language has its origins in much more primitive things, and we've become very advanced at it. But basically then, if the wolves take down a prey, they will share the meat with the ravens. They seem to actually enjoy ravens' company. And I began to look at this interplay, and something just popped into my head, an expression. Because when I look at Odin's wolves and ravens, they have different names. Translated, those names mean anger and hunger, or fury and hunger for the wolves. And then, of course, thought and memory, or in my case, I kind of put it reason and experience. So I came up with an expression to kind of unify that philosophy, because I don't think it's wrong to act in passion, nor do I think it's wrong to act because you want or need something, okay? Those are perfectly normal things to do. Christianity will tell you to curb your desires because whatever, you need to give it to God or whatever. But from a pagan atheist standpoint, I don't view it that way. I don't think it's wrong to act on one's passions. I don't think it's wrong to act on what you want, what your hungers are. But you kind of have to take reason and experience first. And so I came up with an expression that basically goes something like this: feed the wolves, but listen to the ravens first. So my idea here is basically, and I think it's a good pagan or atheist philosophy, it's okay to pursue your wants and needs. It's okay to be passionate about what you do. What you need to remember, though, is looking at people, reasoning things out, and looking at other people's experiences and your own experience, and trying to piece all that together wisely is the best way to go when you're pursuing your passions and when you're going after the things that you want. You need to be rational, and you need to use other people's wisdom as well as your own from your own experiences. Now, experience isn't the proof of anything, but it can be a really good guide to what you've done before. If you do the same thing 10 times, you get the same result, but you don't want that result, maybe it's time to change what you do. And so that expression has kind of guided me. I'm actually thinking that will probably be my first tattoo, which will be a depiction of Odin and that expression, feed the wolves, but listen to the ravens first. I think there's something to be said as an atheist in looking at the world around me and still finding wisdom. That's why I can read some of the Proverbs in the Bible and say, yeah, that's probably good sound advice. But not because it's in the Bible, but because it plays out in reality, okay? And it's always important that when you're having dialogue and debating with people, wisdom says, as much as I would like to wipe religion off the map, I need to remember that these people are simply caught up in the same kind of deception that I was. And so I can't get angry. Rather, I should be empathic. I should be looking at them with compassion. That's why I became a compassionate anti-theist. That's what my reason and my experience wisdom tells me to do when pursuing this goal of convincing people to be a rabid atheist like myself. Okay, and a lot of people they come here and they get after me for the term rabid. Well, you're not foaming at the mouth. You're not, a true atheist. You're not that. I'm like, dude, it's a play on my last name. My real last name is Rabyd. So it's just a play on my name. Okay, I am very rabid about being a compassionate anti-theist. Okay, so there's a big difference there. And I think some people miss that distinction, and they're looking for this guy that's screaming into the microphone or foaming at the mouth or any of that crap, and I just don't do that because I listen to the ravens first. I hear my reason, I hear my experience. It is much better to sit down and dialogue with somebody and win them as your friend than to constantly be enemies and warring with each other. War is stressful, war is destructive, and so is ideological warfare. Okay? So it is better to sit down and negotiate some sort of trade and exchange of information where people talk to each other. This is why a few weeks ago I did a video where I said, listen, just because it's in a religious book or Christians or conservatives say it, doesn't mean you should just discount it. A lot of religion borrows from the real world and tries to play it off as special revelation, but really all they're doing is they're stealing something or borrowing something that they see in the natural world that works, and then they're saying that God did it. Okay? It doesn't mean that they're wrong about this is the way the world works. Okay? It's kind of like people ask me why I'm a libertarianist is because you have one side that wants to be totalitarian about your morality by inflicting, their rules in an old ancient book, but they aren't very totalitarian when it comes to your personal economy or your guns or things like that. The other side is very totalitarian about the economy. And Ed knows too much about economics anymore to believe in socialism or communism as good systems. They just don't take into respect the laws of economics, okay? And that's why they fail. They're easily corrupted, on and on the list goes of why they don't work, okay? So I can take from the conservatives economic freedom, some of the freedoms there. And I can also take the freedom that's being offered morally from the left, saying, listen, marry who you want, be what you want to be. If you're bisexual, gay, lesbian, trans, queer, whatever, be that. Find out what you are and be that, okay? I think once you find out what you are, there's a lot to be said for learning to accept who you are yourself. A lot of people struggle with that. So it's like, okay, this is all right. But the thing for me is, the watchword for me is liberty. The watchword for me is who is offering me freedom from slavery and who's offering me enslavement. The problem I have with the woke crowd and with the right, okay, both engage in censorship, which is a deliberate restriction of people's freedom to exchange ideas. Because no matter what you do, you're going to get it wrong, okay? So it's better to have hate speech. It's better to have freedom of speech than to stifle it with censorship. And both sides like to censor. And usually it's women that like to censor. I hate to be real sexist about this, but men don't really give a shit. Women like to censor because they're the ones that war with their words. Okay, a man, when he has a disagreement with somebody, he'll go up to him and throw down. Okay, sometimes ending in a physical altercation. And you women will scratch your head about this shit because you'll see two guys beat the living shit out of each other. The next day they're having a beer at the bar. And you're like, no, because they settled their disagreement and because they had a fight, they now respect each other. They respect each other's strength and now they can get along. Women don't do that shit. Women play in the court of gossip and shame and all this other shit. This is why I think the woke movement is largely a feminist movement. But you have this shit coming at you, and the reason I like to censor is because then words don't get used, and both sides like to censor, okay? The religious right likes to censor words because they're offensive to Christian women. you can't call a Christian woman who's acting like a thought, okay? You can't do that because she doesn't like that. So she'll have that term banned. Can't use these words because they don't want them to have those words thrown at them when they're acting that way. The same is true with the left, okay? The woke crowd wants to censor certain words like misandry. Misandry is a real thing, double standards, real thing. There's a lot of real things on both sides of the aisle here. And they want that censored because they don't want anybody to challenge their morality. When somebody wants something censored, it usually means they don't want their morality or their idea challenged, which makes for weaker ideas, okay? You want strong ideas, you should take your ideas to somebody you know disagrees with them and have them talk to you about them, because then you can come back and look at those ideas. That's why a lot of people got wrong what I did with the 2 abortion things. They're like, oh, you're advocating for pro-life. No, I'm not. Okay, I am pro-choice as a libertarian, okay? I don't think that decision belongs to me. I don't think it belongs to the government, which is why I oppose what the religious right is trying to do with their pro-life movement, because I don't think that's a governmental issue, that's a moral issue. And government, that's a moral, ethical issue to the individual, the woman that has the pregnancy. And so she's the one that should be in authority over that decision, not the government, not anybody else, okay? You can think it's a life, but if they don't, if they don't think it's alive, the fetus, whether it's alive or not, seems to be really relative on who is talking. And that was my whole point of doing that, is presenting the arguments to see if they had any water without religious context and whether or not people had valid points. I do think the pro-life movement has a couple of valid points. I think they have a valid point when they talk about, oh, it's not part of the woman's body. I don't think that either. I think genetically that's not right, okay? But that doesn't mean that the woman loses her right to choose. I just think the argument that it's part of my body is a bad argument. I think it's a simple fact of the matter that the woman is the one who has to make the sacrifices in order for the child to survive, okay? Should she not have a choice about whether she makes those sacrifices? From my perspective, the answer is yes. Okay, that's the issue to me. But it's not about it being part of her body. I don't think it is. Okay, but it's about the fact that this woman is going to have to, and I know some of you women are going to get triggered about that, this woman is going to have to incubate this child to have it survive. I don't mean that in the sense that it's mechanical. There is a biological incubation that takes place on the fetus as it grows. Okay, so that's just the process. To me, incubation is a process, not a thing, okay? It's a process, not an object, okay? So it's more that. So do I think they have some valid points? Yes, but I also think they have some really shitty points, okay? So that's what I'm trying to do. For me, it is better to have my ideas tested by somebody who disagrees with me. That's, to me, going to somebody in experience. Listening to the ravens, listening to experiences, not just of my own, but of other people, listening to other people's reasoning before I act in passion, before I act going after what I want. I need to listen to the ravens, and the ravens aren't just my reason experience, they're everybody's. Now, you can't listen ad nauseum until you have to make a decision sooner or later, but I think we all should probably realize that ideology is changing and growing, and we're constantly modifying what we think or do. Only cults try to keep people in a certain central dogma without letting them stray off the reservation. You want to know the truest sign something's a cult? They don't allow any other thought in. They don't allow other people to talk it, read it, do anything. A cult is an ideological isolation echo chamber. Okay? And when you're isolating yourself from other people, you won't dialogue with other people, you won't come with your ideas and say, are these right? You won't listen to the other people's ideas and say, they may have a point, then you're in a fucking cult. Okay, because you've been indoctrinated that this is the way, and there's only one truth, and this is the truth. And that's egotistical, okay? You Christians that come here and comment, you're egotistical with some of your comments. You're just straight up, there's no humility in what you're saying. You think there is, but there isn't. You're being humble in Christ and being obedient, trying to win people for Jesus, but you're coming off, you're the only ones that have figured out the truth. You're the only ones that aren't going to burn in hell. Everybody else is going to burn in hell if they don't come to your way of thinking. You think it's all about you. You know, God is the one that speaks to you. God is the one that lifts you up. God is the one that does all this stuff for you. He's the one that bails you out and all this other shit. That's arrogant. God listens to your prayers, but not the prayers, you know. There's all kinds of ego trip with religion and faith. The problem with religion, faith, and cults is they don't listen to the ravens. They just act in their passions, and they just go forward doing what they think is right and going after what they want. They don't think about how to get there properly, and they don't consider the wisdom of others. Well, that's just a little thought of I had for this first edition of the Pagan's Pulpit. I figured I should use a quote from myself and kind of break it down what I mean. I'll probably be doing this every Sunday where I'll take some atheist quote or pagan quote and, you know, see if there's some wisdom in it that we can all live by. I'd much rather have this be a little bit more lighthearted. I'm not really making a statement one way or another with all the things I said today, but I'm just saying you need to learn to listen. You need to learn to dialogue because that's listening to the ravens, so that when you go for what you want and you go in your passions, your anger, or even you get angry about some injustice, you're going forward on the path towards justice, having thought about it first and having listened. That's what you need to do. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate every single like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Rabyd, also known as the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.